Cost of Victory, Book 1 of the Unseen Scar series by C.R. Saxon. Chapter 20. Ferdinand's first attempt ended in disappointment, but an in-depth study of the violin strings taught him something interesting. The basic construction for an electric-stringed instrument was simple: wire coiled around a magnet. But getting the proper sounds for the lower tones, regular stretched wire wasn't good enough. Eventually he found a detailed picture of the lower strings. They weren't only thicker, but textured. A fine wire wrapped around a stretched one. After finagling a lathe from storage, he managed a number of various wrapped strings. Now he was searching for the right tone. Stringing them, he plucked and tuned before taking up the bow. This batch was close, spot on with all but one. Who thought of metal for strings? But traditional gut couldn't induce current. Building his electric violin and the amplifying device was wonderful, though its body looked about as far from a violin as you could get. Twisted plexiglass was bent into a swirling fog with strings laid on top. It played beautifully, and he liked the oddity of its appearance. So did Oya. Her excited eyes and unfounded praise turned him red, but boosted his confidence. She insisted it needed a tiny green flower on the bridge, but that spot was only visible to the player. The next day she arrived with a flower carved from a shell. He stained it green. Ferdinand smiled softly. When was the last time he smiled because he felt like it? I don't deserve to feel this good. But neither did he want to stop, which made the guilt intensify. Tweaking and tinkering, Ferdinand soaked in the silence. For months that voice haunted him. For weeks he drowned it out with music. And now, it vanished. But how? The fisherman wasn't real, couldn't be real, but did a psych realize he was broken? Were they capable of healing a mind? Why invade his dreams to do so? An alarm chimed. Ferdinand put down his new toy with a sigh. Making the last string and attaching the flower would have to wait. Now for a meeting with the superintendent. Why isn't Zhao doing this? The sciences needed more time. But how did one convince an administrator to let an entire group of students out of classes for 2 weeks? And why send the least charismatic among them to try? Packing up, he headed to the main island and on to the administration building. He stepped up into the reception area as the superintendent's office door opened. Dea escorted out a science student, a boy 3 years younger than Ferdinand, and normally well-behaved. But from the look on the man's face, the child was in trouble. Rupert now, what are you doing here? Asking was rude and out of line, but he didn't put this much work into that stupid show for its players to get into trouble. Arms folded, the boy scrunched his face and grumbled. The instructor was being unreasonable. The rumbling sound of Dea clearing his voice stopped the rest of the thinker's words. Even without that deep, intimidating voice, everyone knew those tattoos weren't just for show. Lord Ferdinand, feel free to escort Rupert out, then report back. That wasn't a generous offer. The look on the superintendent's face. This was Ferdinand's fault. Turning, the skeleton scolded the younger boy. You know where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to be doing, Rupert, now. Get there and do it. Who put you in charge? You did, along with every other scientist. Nodding to the superintendent, Ferdinand walked the boy out into the hall. I know you're in pain, but getting in trouble is only hurting yourself more. And what do you know? Have you ever lost anyone? Self-loathing, fear, desperation, it all refused to be buried with the rest. It burned and punched at his chest, it constricted his lungs and stole his strength. I'm failing her again. I let her die, then her son. Wrapping stick-thin arms around his middle, Ferdinand tried stilling his trembling. Now her granddaughter. I'm killing an innocent child. Why is she sick? I should be the one in there. Please don't die. His voice cracked, forcing him to whisper. Please. Please don't die. No, Ferdinand hid squarely behind his mask of stone, lying. No, I haven't. But how would your parents feel about you expressing your sorrow like this? Clenching his jaw shut, the boy looked down. You've never acted this way. And it wasn't just Rupert. Other scientists were moody since the end of break, and it intensified the longer they prepared for the show. Is the stress too much? What can I do for you? Rupert hesitated. There are a few musicians. Can I get more of their music? Huh? What does that have to do with anything? If you stay out of trouble. Yes, sir. Excusing the child, Ferdinand went back in. Hopefully Master Day isn't too unhappy with us. Timid and uncertain, Ferdinand's apprentice approached. John Dinta, may I ask for your expertise? Ah, Lord Elbarat, right? Call me Elby. Elby, of course. Please sit down. John lowered his voice. Everyone was working silently, figuring out the details of their assignments. What can I help you with? Elby held out a medical disc and removed the cover. Do you know anything at all about these? I didn't know they came apart. John's comment was less than helpful. I'm sorry, but I don't, not really. Not really? John gave Elby his full attention. 2 years ago, my brother requested 100 of these. Thinking I'd be useful, I offered to help make them. Replicating things is easy for me, but he turned me down. Why reject help with such a big order? I didn't ask. Guess I didn't really care. Between classes and earning my evaluation. Looking at the disc, John said more to himself than Elby. I should have been more insistent. You think this is complicated. I'll take it apart for you. It comes further apart? The question dripped with skepticism. Aren't the insides too delicate for removal? Elby disassembled it for John as he had for a dozen others. See? Whoa. Ferdinand made this? No, not just made. Thought it up, designed it, and figured it all out? From scratch? I understand you don't know much about them, but do you know where he would have started, or what he was thinking? Anything? John shook his head. Who would think of something like this? The circuit boards were custom-made. He'd never seen any so thin. They were smaller than standard microboards, and there were a number of them. Why? Mind if I keep this for a little bit? I'd like to take some time thinking it over. Elby's mismatched eyes lit up. Of course! I'll show you how to reassemble it. Nothing's more painful than doing nothing. Sitting still, being useless, this wasn't what athletes did. Athletes were active. Leaders were always doing something, not nothing. Being still hurt physically. Not even calisthenics could ease Zephyr's aching muscles, not within the confines of his room. After that odd dream with the elf woman, the prince slept properly for 2 solid days. Or that's what the healer told him before leaving him in this isolation. You've slept 2 days, but are in good physical health. Those were the last words he heard, the last thing anyone said to him. How long have I been in here? A week? It feels like a year. Each passing moment he wished harder for his mom, aunt, anyone he trusted to come. The longer he sat, the tighter his chest became. That tightness spread to the rest of his body. His insides shook. If he didn't run, work, do something, why won't they let me out? Stay calm. Onyx's eyes stared at the ceiling, praying for someone, anyone to come. A week of solitude. Food and clothing were delivered, but he never saw by whom. It felt like he wasn't here, like he didn't exist. Why? His voice broke. Their request was granted. Starting tomorrow, the scientists would all but live on this island until the show. John watched the tinkerer drag in a workboard with a detailed schedule. Ferdinand announced when they'd arrive, how hard they'd work, and how much complaining the gent would listen to. Completed assignments were gathered up, then Ferdinand let Oya at them. He was walking easier, and the metal arm brace was replaced with the lightweight skeletal one. Even if the gent broke it at John's home, it'd need the solid brace until the show. Maybe Ferdinand did something less serious? There's no way the skeleton saw a healer for it. And assuming he was healthy enough to undergo healing, 1 session and he'd be fixed. I'll never understand him. Later that evening, John sat in the common room of his suite, deciphering the disc. No wonder he didn't accept my help. These were inordinately complicated. The detail. When did Ferdinand learn this level of programming? The skill, knowledge, and genius this took blew his mind. John fought with all his power to catch up to Ferdinand in their science classes, so he knew the skeleton hadn't been taught anything like this. How did Ferdinand dream up something this complex at 12? No wonder he received a lab so early. But he started everything early, huh? Ferdinand wasn't yet 3 when starting his first year. Normally students began at 5. He completed his apprenticeship by the time he was 4, in half the time it normally took, and before most actually started classes. It just continued on. Is there such thing as a genius among geniuses? I'm smart, but I can't replicate these. For the first time, John kicked himself. He should have paid attention to his allies' work. But Ferdinand's inventions were silly, or pointless. What have I missed out on thinking that? Tap, 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 tap. Fingernails drumming on glass interrupted his thoughts. John looked around. Wait. The only glass was the common room window, and he was on the 3rd floor. Yet eerie green eyes stared in mischievously. Shoving his heart back in his chest, he ran to open the window. Making his voice a whisper took great effort. Are you insane? Come, Oya commanded in a cheery tone. You are insane. I'm not jumping out a window. Not wanting anyone to fall from this height, he braced himself and offered a hand. Green eyes rolled. She took it and swung inside. A giant grin curled her lips when she offered a long screen. Sheet music, this is for you. You're making deliveries? Past curfew? Don't you have anything better to do? No. John shook his head. Oya's a girl. Stop being rude to her. A small stack of papers was plopped on top of the screen. A secret between you and me. Why? Her common. She's getting better. It's, surprise, she winked. For whom? He asked, though he already knew. Our friend. Our? Oya pointed at John and then herself. My friend and your friend is our friend. Ferdinand, a friend? It was an odd thought, and it felt wrong. Friends are more important than allies. Her pose spoke to generations of wisdom concerning such things. The moment John blinked, she disappeared. Am I dreaming? Ferdinand sat in his lab, fiddling with everything submitted to him. There was so much, even delegating some things he had to do, simply because he was the only one with a skill set. Like these cuffs. Oya wanted to fly. It was an odd request, but he had an idea. Energy conversion. At its most basic level, all Energists did was convert energy into something they could manipulate. Whether healing a body or moving objects around, it was basically the same. From there, energy-converting cuffs came to mind. Working was difficult without full dexterity of his arm, but every time he started, Oya materialized and took his tools. Thanks to her, 2 sets were completed. It wasn't a bad arrangement. She followed directions perfectly and had steady hands. But burdening her was unacceptable. I'll make the next set before she arrives. No sooner had he thought this than she was there an inch from his face. Hi! It was her last word in common for the night. You're ready to work? Seeing her there, sitting across from him, the warmth she brought, Ferdinand smiled only to look away. I don't deserve this. Why am I troubling her? It's wrong. I'm horrible. She's already done so much for us. But this was fun. Yes, I've started them. May I help? Permission or not, she'd help. It was nice of her making it sound like saying yes was generous. Thank you, please. Your arm's healing quickly. Bare toes danced on the floor as delicate fingers placed one piece after another. Yeah. You developed a regeneration potion or some such? That'd make me a popular child. How would I make such a thing? I have that powder, turning it into an oral medicine. As he considered, he turned cold. He was healing fast, too fast. Then there were his dreams. Every time he slept, nightmares started but never lasted long. Evelyn would appear and take him to her fantasy world. Then, when he talked to her, she described the same dream as him every time. Is she a psych? He needed to talk to Mother Artemis about it, if he could bring himself to. Whenever they took Evelyn away from the screen, he'd give it to John or turn it off. After that, he couldn't face them. What's wrong? Isn't healing quickly a good thing? Yes, but no. Anything you'd like to share? He wanted to, but he wasn't sure. What does she know about dreams? I love listening, and I have no one I'd tell, unless you wanted me to. I've been wondering about Evelyn. How so? She keeps appearing in my dreams. Oya grinned. Those must be wild. Yeah, but when I talk to her, she describes the same dream I had. Is that a bad thing? I don't think so, but they only found you recently. Maybe she also has abilities we didn't realize. If this is the case, how many of us are roaming around unawares? Oya laughed. I think you worry too much. Or maybe you think too much. How is sharing a dream something of concern? It isn't possible, once for coincidence, but it's happened almost every night this week. Does it scare her? I haven't told her. Does it scare you? No, I look forward to sleeping. What worries me is it shouldn't be possible. Oya put down the nearly completed cuff and looked at him. This girl loves you very much, doesn't she? Red flushed his face. I don't know why. Doesn't matter. Stories my grandfather told when he traveled for work. During those times his son, my dad, appeared in his dreams. Dad had the same dreams. Grandpa said it was because his son needed him, and he desperately wanted to be there for his son. So they found each other in the dreamlands. For as outlandish as that story was, her face said it was both normal and completely true. Maybe she needs her big brother. I know how much you care for her. I don't think I can believe in that level of superstition. You don't have to. Just enjoy this precious treasure for what it is. Oya grinned playfully and went back to the cuff. Besides, people have walked the dreamland since before humans started making records. You can find a number of stories and legends on that cube. The cube. He'd spent countless hours listening to music and learning about forgotten instruments. It filled him with a strange kind of peace. Exactly how much could he learn from it? But that had nothing to do with this. You don't think it's an ability? John's family knows all about the mutation. 2 of them are healers. Don't you think they'd have noticed? Besides, she's open and cooperative. Oya laughed. Speaking of which, Ferdinand grinned at her Cheshire smirk. Has Healer Elu caught you yet? Mischievousness filled her face, and her exotic green eyes doubled in size. No. Classifying you is required for passing his evaluation. His what? Before starting advanced studies, students have to pass an evaluation to determine if they're capable and ready. When you take it too young, they give you an extra project to see how badly you want to pass. And I'm his project? Unfortunately for him. I see. Oya shrugged. His luck will turn soon. You can only hide for so long. Yeah, Ferdinand felt the same. After 12 years, everything was falling apart. If things continued like this, others would find out. He'd fail irreparably, just like he did with grandmother. Rubbing his arm, he found it didn't hurt at all. Are they doing better split into groups? Oh, yes. It was a good idea grouping them together. Those representing the psychs and healers are having some trouble still. Ha ha! Oh, ye of little imagination. It's not that hard. Watch. Grabbing a cuff set, Oya attached them to her wrists and ankles and jumped out a window. Ferdinand hurried after her. He'd only gotten to his feet when she shot straight up into the sky, until she was barely visible. Then, she was falling. Fast. His insides froze. His heart struggled to beat. Cold sweat broke out across his skin. Did I make a mistake? She's going to die. Pull up! Ferdinand screamed as soon as she was close enough to hear. But she didn't. She nosedived. Alien green eyes glowed with crazed excitement. Her mouth was a perfect Cheshire grin. The world froze. Only Oya moved. The only one who ever called him friend. The only one who ever talked to him for fun. The only one left who was kind to him because she wanted to be. He was going to watch her die. Just like grandmother. Just like Lyramark and Yuwaru. Just like the millions he didn't know. I'm going to watch her die. This isn't funny. Pull up, Oya! Oya loathed losing her game of chicken with the ground. Activating the cuffs last second, she flew forward, circling wide. Slowing, she landed next to her friend. Ferdinand stood, rigid as a statue. His eyes were completely dilated. No color was left in his skin. She didn't have a chance to tease him before those blackened crystals rolled back in his head, and he dropped to the ground. Guess I went too far. I didn't mean to stop his heart.